and welcome back to Felony Spectator. I am your host, Heather. On today's episode, we're talking about the case of Brandon Hole. Now, I don't know if I need to give you warnings on a true crime channel, but this case does discuss a public shooting resulting in multiple victims, which is a sensitive subject. If you're sensitive to that kind of subject, you might not want to watch this one. But let's get into it. Brandon Hole was born August 20th, 2001 in Indianapolis. He was said to be a bit of an odd kid growing up. His mother said when he was around the age of 5, he wanted to wear 3 pairs of shorts at one time. And you couldn't tell him no because he was very stubborn and also very defiant. Oftentimes, she would see him rocking back and forth while watching TV, which was also a little alarming. And these behaviors started after a tragic incident in Brandon's life. At around the age of 4, Brandon's father took his own life. Brandon's mother later recalled that the incident occurred after a heated argument, and sadly, Brandon was there to witness it. After that, Brandon became very depressed. He was soon very destructive, especially if he was interrupted while doing a task. Now, I don't know if his mother took him to see a doctor or not to help him at this young age, but his behavior only got worse as he grew up. In 2011, when Brandon was just 9 years old, he was sent to Barrington Health Center in Indianapolis. Here, he would be diagnosed with disruptive behavior disorder, OCD, anxiety, and depression. He would be prescribed Lexapro, which mainly treated the anxiety and the depression. At age 10, he went back to the clinic due to his uncontrolled rage. His records would show that he was often caught excessively lying, had very disrespectful behavior, and he once used a baseball bat to make holes in the wall simply because he was bored. At age 11, police were then called to the home by his mother. I guess what happened was Keith, his stepdad, started a water fight. And this water fight started off okay, they were having fun, but then a switch flipped, and Brandon suddenly flipped out and started to rage. He would run into the house and lock himself in the bathroom where he basically trashed the room. When his mother tried to get him out of the room, Brandon would then punch her, slap her, he bit her, kicked her, and then grabbed 2 knives from the kitchen and charged at her, injuring her. She sustained a small cut to her arm, but she was now scared of Brandon and wasn't sure what he was going to do next or what he was truly capable of. It was now at the point where she didn't want to upset him at all, and she was basically walking on eggshells around him. Brandon did get probation for the incident and was meant to take counseling as per the judge. Unfortunately, that didn't help much. He would be suspended from school for fighting, and it seemed that every year he became more and more angry. In 2014, he quit school, and he was only in grade 6, so Sheila, his mother, was forced to homeschool Brandon. A social worker would also come twice a week to the home, but Brandon mostly isolated himself in his bedroom. Over the years, Brandon socialized very little, he didn't have many friends, and he stopped taking his medication. He preferred to spend his time in his bedroom on his computer or watching TV. Searches for mass shootings were later found on his computer, but he denied wanting to hurt anybody. He told his counselor that he didn't want to waste his time or cause any family trauma. So he assured her that he would never do anything like that. In 2013, Brandon was involved in another police incident. He was said to have gotten into a verbal altercation with someone in which the police were called. The verbal altercation led to an assault, and that's why the police got involved. But this incident or any of his mental health struggles didn't prevent him from obtaining guns in the future. On March 3rd, 2020, Brandon asked his mother to drive him to a gun shop because he wanted to go look at guns. On the way to the store, Brandon pointed out a billboard that was a suicide awareness billboard, and he turned to her and said, "There's your sign." Sheila responded by telling her son that if he was serious, she'd need to stop him from owning guns and would take any of them away. Now, despite that conversation, they still went to the store, and Brandon ended up buying a firearm, but no ammo because they had been sold out of what he needed. Later that day, Brendan lashed out at Sheila, and with a closed fist, he struck her in the arm, telling her to shut up when she tried to talk to him. And I guess she wasn't happy that he had actually bought a gun, and she asked him what his plan was with said gun. He actually told her that he was going to point it at police so they would shoot him. He then said something along the lines of not having the life that he wanted to live, and he would end it his way. Sheila, Brendan's mother, and her daughter were very worried and went to the police station the following morning and told them that they were concerned that Brendan might try to end his life via cop. Sheila assumed that they would take that threat very seriously and detain him. She also thought he'd be forced into seeing a new counselor or be put on new medication. Indiana has a red flag law, also known as the Jake Laird law, which allows police officers to take custody of a person's firearm under certain circumstances. This law can only be exercised when officers can clearly articulate that the safety of the public is in jeopardy. This law can also prevent a person from purchasing a firearm in the future if they specify that for the individual case. Now, when police arrived to speak with Brendan, they did place Brendan in handcuffs. The police report would say that Brendan was very anxious, and he asked for the police to go turn off the power strip on his computer. He also asked that nobody look at his computer. This computer was kept in his bedroom. It wasn't the family computer or out in the open. Brendan was 18, so his mother didn't monitor his activity, and she mostly respected his privacy. So she had no idea what was on it. When officers went into his room to seize his shotguns under the red flag law, they did look over at his computer monitor and saw that he had been looking at white supremacist websites. They didn't have a warrant to look further, but it was also reported that criminal intelligence was notified about what was observed on Brandon's computer when they took his shotgun. Now, at the time, Brandon didn't want to discuss his suicide plan with the officers. Instead, he asked for counseling. So he was taken to a mental health facility under a temporary hold at the local hospital for assessment. Now, Brendan should have had a full assessment, but he was free to go in just under 2 hours. And normally people are there for up to 72 hours, but Brendan was let go pretty early. The doctor at the hospital didn't diagnose Brendan with anything, and Brendan denied having any issues, so he went home without any consequence. Now, Brendan's gun was at least taken under the red flag law, but he was never red flagged himself. Under the Jake Laird law, once an officer confiscates a gun under that law, the officer has to submit an affidavit to the court, which is then signed by a judge. The officer can also submit a request to have a person's gun license suspended. It can also prohibit them from owning, renting, or being in possession of a firearm for up to 1 year. When that's submitted, the judge has 14 days to determine if law enforcement can keep the guns or return them to the owner. In Brendan's case, they offered to return his weapons. An investigating officer called Brendan's mom and informed her that they were looking into keeping his weapon. But as you will hear, there is some flaws with the system.
Needed to talk to you about what happened with Brandon. My role in this is simply just to see if we're going to file a retention case. If they file a retention case, he would also be deemed to be a dangerous person, which only means that he wouldn't be able to purchase a firearm. This isn't a criminal record, and it's not, you can't even see it. Like if somebody were to search for criminal cases and stuff, these cases don't go into there because they're just civil. Once they get filed, like if I needed to check on one, I can't even do it. I have to send an email to the prosecutor's office and ask them to look because they're the only ones that can access it. So to see like what the status of it is.
To me, it doesn't seem right that if someone does have their license suspended, the police can't even see that on their criminal record. And it's not something that can be easily found. Remember, Brendan was in and out of the hospital within 2 hours after being temporarily detained, and he wasn't deemed a threat. So in Brendan's case, the judge didn't see any need for Brendan's weapon to be held. Brendan was given the choice if he wanted his firearm back or if the police could destroy it for him. Brendan chose not to get it back. He promised that he was going to turn his life around and do the right thing. The following month, in April of 2020, an agent visited the home and spoke with Brendan to see how he was doing. Brendan again said he wanted to turn his life around and maybe join the FBI. The officer blatantly told Brendan that that probably wouldn't happen. This officer also privately told Sheila, Brendan's mother, that her son hit every red flag that they look for to determine if someone could be a mass shooter. Some of those traits were being a loner, beliefs that he was always the victim, depression, homicidal thoughts, anger problems, narcissism, and his fixation on past shootings and mass murderers. Meanwhile, Brendan had promised that he was going to turn his life around. He got employment at Fedex in August of 2020, and by most accounts, he seemed to enjoy working there. He had moved out and was becoming more independent, and Sheila was thrilled. She was so proud of him and thought that things were starting to get better. But Sheila didn't know that he was also using money he got from government stimulus and bought several more firearms. 2 in July, and another purchase again in September of 2020. Brendan also got fired from his Fedex job. I should clarify that some reports say he got fired, but it's also been reported that he actually just stopped showing up to work one day. But by October of 2020, he was officially no longer an employee. Now, Sheila believes he tried to gain employment again and tried to stay afloat, but by March of 2021, Brendan moved home depressed and feeling defeated with his life. His mother would book him appointments to get him assessed again and start treatment again for his depression. This time, he was diagnosed with general anxiety disorder, recurrent major depressive disorder, among other things. Even though he was finally getting help for his mental health, he was also stockpiling ammo and hundreds of dollars worth of tactile accessories like slings, grips, cleaning kits, and vests. During this time, Brendan also became obsessed with My Little Pony. It's not said when this obsession technically started, but we will get into that and what the police found later on. During a counseling session in March of 2021, Brendan expressed that he no longer had empathy. He had no care for other people, including his own flesh and blood, referring to his mother. He seemed emotionally checked out. His next counseling session was much of the same talk. But he also suggested that he was a danger to society and that society should fear him. After that, another counseling session was set up immediately. Then, during the emergency counseling session, his counselor would label him as a patient with a moderate suicide risk. A plan was discussed, and Brendan would then meet with a social worker. Brendan went to his last counseling session on April 15th of 2021 with his mother. But when it was done, Sheila asked for more time and scheduled another session the following week. She didn't think counseling should end just yet. Something in her knew he needed more help. The remainder of the day was seemingly normal. Sheila remembers eating dinner and Brendan being in a fairly good mood. They both went to bed and she thought she'd see him in the morning, but Sheila had no idea that Brendan didn't go to bed at all. Instead, Brendan drove himself back to his old job at Fedex. At 11 p.m., he loaded his weapons, got out of his car, and entered the Fedex building. Everyone was terrified as they saw a hooded figure with a long gun randomly shooting in all directions at anyone in his way. People ran for their lives, hiding in storage rooms or under their desks. And most people didn't have their cell phones due to a company policy, but those near a phone frantically started calling 911 for help.
County 911, is anybody experiencing flu-like or COVID-19 symptoms?
No, somebody's shooting in my hub. I'm at FedEx in Plainsville.
What's the address?
There's gunshots everywhere.
Okay, what is the address?
The address is 8951 Mirabelle Road.
How many shots did you hear?
I don't know if anybody got shot. Can we go out down here? Can we run on way to the end and go out?
Don't go outside. Stay where you're safe.
8951 Mirabelle Road.
I want you to stay with me, okay? Don't hang up, okay?
Shut that door!
Brendan wasn't inside long and would then walk outside the building and continue to fire at random, also shouting incoherently as he went. He then confidently walked back to his car, pointed the gun on himself, ending his own life. The whole ordeal lasted approximately 4 minutes, but it felt like an eternity to everyone working there trapped inside. When police arrived, they found 4 people in the parking lot who were shot. 1 was still inside their car. 4 people inside the building were also shot, who all died from their injuries. So in those 4 minutes, a total of 8 people were killed. 5 people were also taken to the hospital and 2 were able to be treated on scene. The names of the victims were Matthew Alexander, 32, who was said to be a great kid; Samara Blackwell, 19, who wanted to become a police officer; Amarjeet John, 66, a grandma; Jaswinder Kaur, 50, who earned money to support family back in India; Jaswinder Singh, 68, who was on his second week of the job; Amarjeet Skan, 48, who was supporting her 2 sons and disabled husband; Carly Smith, 19, a former high school softball player; and John Weishart, 74, who was going to be celebrating his 50th wedding anniversary that year. Not one of these people knew Brandon personally or had any issues with him at all. They were randomly targeted and shot for no reason. Special agents would get a warrant for Brandon's electronics after the incident, as it's now their job to find a motive. On Brandon's computer, they would find that he was somewhat obsessed with My Little Pony and was involved in a subculture called bronies, which is a combination of bro and ponies. It mainly consists of adult men who are extreme fans of the cartoon My Little Pony. Less than an hour prior to the shooting, Brandon posted a photo of the cartoon pony Applejack with the memo, "I hope that I can be with Applejack in the afterlife. My life has no meaning without her." Out of curiosity, I researched Applejack and found that Applejack died in the series. I believe she was poisoned and then passed away, which upset a lot of her fans. Now, I always assumed that My Little Pony was an innocent kids cartoon, but I guess it's much more than that. People take it very seriously. They have their favorite characters, they like the storylines and the music. There is even My Little Pony conventions. Some news reports claim that the group is cultish, and some of its members have been known for their right-white nationalist extremism. With that said, there are members who argue to say that it's mostly made up of just regular people who like the show. Now, I highly doubt Brandon's obsession with the show made him a bad person, but having an extreme obsession with a cartoon character could be cause for concern, especially paired with other mental illnesses. But was the death of Applejack his motive for killing? I don't know. It might have just been one more thing in his life that made him upset. The straw that broke the camel's back, so to speak. Or maybe it was a coincidence that Applejack died around the same time he planned to end his life, and he just hoped to see her again on the other side. Brandon had 2 Facebook accounts dedicated to My Little Pony Friendship is Magic series. They have been removed, so I wasn't able to see what he was writing. It sounds like it was mostly fan groups of people who genuinely liked the show and wanted to discuss it. A special agent, Paul Keenan, had come out and had said that he believed the motivation was masculinity and capability. He was quoted to say, "As far as his masculinity goes, he's trying to prove that he's a man basically by doing this act. He tried to live on his own, failed to do that, and moved back into his mother's house." He goes on to say, quote, "The capability part of it, he was interested in the military, so that was the capability part, to prove that he was capable of doing something like this," end quote. This special agent also focused a lot of his attention on what was viewed on Brandon's computer. There was also a lot of war-type stuff. Some of it was German military-type things. And some news reports say it doesn't seem like there was any animosity towards any group in particular, and it mostly seemed like he was curious or just reading about it. Others would report that he was very much into these supremacist groups, and this shooting could very well have been racially motivated because 90% of the employees that worked at Fedex were members of the Sikh community. Prior to the incident, Brandon had been eating MREs, which are meals ready to eat and are consumed by the armed forces. It wasn't thought that Brandon was a disgruntled worker, so a lot of people assume that it was opportunistic. He knew people would be there and he knew the building. Now, this was his last place of employment, so maybe there was a motive of jealousy. All these people could go to work and live a normal life, but he failed to do that. So maybe he took his frustration out on others. Brandon's mother spoke out about and said, quote, "I don't grieve his death. I can't. I grieve the victims." She also mentioned that she missed several red flags while he was growing up and he should have gotten more help. My thoughts? I don't know if I agree with the investigator who thought this had to do with Brandon's masculinity and capability. If being masculine was a problem, I feel like his love for My Little Pony would be a little more discreet. Maybe not, but to me it seemed more like Brendan's mental illness was too much and he couldn't handle it anymore. His mental illness started from such a young age. He needed way more help than what he got. I am curious to know why his mother didn't do more, and I'm also curious why he was allowed to purchase weapons as someone with severe mental illness. Some stats say around 33% of mass shootings are by men who have serious mental illness. And those numbers are subjective based on what report you're reading, so take it as you will. And I would think that number should be much higher because healthy people don't go around shooting random strangers for no reason, minus gangs or accidents. Maybe by getting people more mental health and not allowing ill people to own weapons could lower those stats. I don't know. Without getting too political, let me know your thoughts in the comments. That's it today. Thanks again for joining me here at Felony Spectator, and we'll see you again soon.